Anyone with an appreciation for the arts can usually recognize the beauty and attention to detail in manga, isolated from the story, plot, and characters, whether that be physical copies or digitally digested. This video was co-written by my friend, shout out to Rio, who is far more versed in artistic jargon than me, her being an incredible artist in her own right, and therefore she offered to analyze parts of this video. Berserk not only specializes in narrative excellence, but also the art, the mark-making, perspective, value, and basic elements and principles of art coming together in what would be any art professor's wet dream, as well as being able to be seamlessly incorporated into portraying the story Miura always wanted. The purpose of this video is to analyze the incredible art from the manga Berserk from the perspective of the art itself, the composition, the craftsmanship, and the principles of art. The story itself is incredible, but the artwork, each small panel with so much detail, deserves to be appreciated and viewed from a purely artistic point of view. I am no art critic, but I can appreciate it, so please join me as we delve into some of the masterpieces from the king of seinen, Kentaro Miura. Miura was always destined to place his pen on paper, beginning at age 10 and crafting a manga even back then, named Miura Ranger. This manga was purely made for his classmates and published within the school environment and spanned an impressive 40 volumes. As Miura grew, so did his artistic prowess, enlisting in an art course in Nihon University in 1985. 3 years later, he would draw the prototype of Berserk, which contained many elements that survived and altered into the official release. Even masters of the pen had their inspirations as they blossomed, including Miura. Some notable inspirations consist of Fist of the North Star, Violence Jack, Hellraiser, and others such as Disney animation films. The exaggerated emotions and implied movement in Miura's manga art is definitely the effect of animation films, especially those Miura would have grown up with. Throughout the manga, there are also many Easter egg type references to traditional artists such as the Bosque Garden and Ubix Tea Party. Obviously, wrapped into all of this is a mix of medieval European history and literature that Miura drew from to craft his pseudo-medieval environment. Berserk features numerous detailed depictions of castles, cathedrals, and medieval towns that obviously derive from our own European history, alongside much iconography such as those used during his depictions of religious institutes. The Gothic and Renaissance styles are also frequently portrayed, characterized by pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses. Alongside this, interior spaces are also grandly designed, showing many hints of the Baroque style that are often established through dramatic grandeur and rich color, mainly shown during the drawings involving the nobility. Obviously, he uses a lot of line work as it is a manga traditionally done in line art, but within the line art is a lot of use of mark making and texture. The more hatching used by Miura, the darker the panel becomes, but as every artist knows, with dark must come the light. Contrast is an important part of adding to your form with the use of shadows and light sources. Miura, whilst an incredible artist, no doubt, is risen to an even grander scale as we know he studied his history to make Berserk even more realistic to the pseudo-medieval society he wishes to portray. The Eclipse has its place in manga and artistic history for its horrendously visceral depictions beginning from chapter 73. The art delves deeply into a dark palette to emphasize the tenebrosity of the situation. The eerie arrival and design of the God Hand stems from inspiration of the film Hellraiser, released in 1987, and the Cenobites, supernatural beings who operate in exploring pleasure and pain, much like the God Hand, who are free to do as thou wilt. Like the grotesque designs of the Cenobites, Miura uses repetition of ghoulish faces to portray the horror and demanding power surrounding the four members. Repetition can be used by the artist to emphasize the severity and reinforce key themes and symbols the artist wants to relay to the reader. The strange faces of the realm are frequently repeated to show the vast and boundless landscape that the band are now trapped in, alluding to condemned souls trapped within hell, drawn from mythological inspiration and Miura's own dark imagination. This panel's composition is an example of balance, proportion, and the rule of thirds or the golden section, as well as contrast. For reference, the golden section is a mathematical ratio commonly found in nature and art, where the ratio of two quantities is the same as the ratio of their sum to the larger of the two quantities. While specific examples of the golden section might not be explicitly acknowledged by Miura, there are many instances in the manga where the compositions and panel layouts reflect principles of balance and harmony reminiscent of the golden section. The dramatic transformations of Griffith and the emergence of the God Hand members are framed to draw the viewer's eye to key elements in a balanced manner. Here we see the small army of horses and men in the foreground standing up against the much larger wave of horror in the background. The strip of ground separating these two groups of figures is forcing the perspective that whilst they are far from one another, the difference in size is immense. Whilst I am not focusing so much on the typography of the manga, the word of this panel rings true. The gritty use of stippling, which is a technique used to mark make, here the foreground is showing how the band is putting up a lot of dust in frenzy of panic and despair. Before Griffith utters the fateful words that condemn the band to hell, he is surrounded by pure white backgrounds, reminiscing on the treasured times he spent with Guts, who made him forget his dream. Despite the terror around him, the art is pure, beautiful, and therefore ever more tragic. Griffith's face isolated from the chaos, which is a technique used in filmology to emphasize a single thing in a character's mind as everything else goes numb and silent. The shining white is not only contrasting heavily with the scenes around them, but also establishes more emotional intensity, and this makes the moment ever more gut-wrenching. After Griffith's words, we see a contrasting panel to the one analysed earlier, the grit, smoke, dust and distance all but gone. The harsh line work gives a terrifying sense of rush, panic and lust, emitting mainly from the apostles and demons that can now unleash upon the band. The line work is also beautifully done to show us the speed and swiftness the demons are approaching, and the use of a double spread panel gives us a sense of no escape to the reader as the forces approach like a tsunami covering everything in sight. One of the climaxes of the Conviction arc occurs after the harrowing imagery shown by the demonic forces, the darkest night extinguished by the rising rays of a new day. Griffith has just been reincarnated into the physical realm, and his return is drawn with a stunning amount of light imagery, although mixed in with the slight shadows, which reflects his characters of fake purity. If he was completely pious, there would not be so many shadows in the background. This is an example of Miura's intent with meaning behind his artwork. We know Griffith to be a flawed and nuanced character, so placing him in what is at first glance a pure setting, his hair is so incredibly drawn to imply a sense of velvet smoothness, clean and kept, godly even, but then realizing there is some darkness within the art is a wonderful showcase of contrast. The dramatic irony is subtle enough for those within the world to not realize throughout the story, but also for readers to pick up on. The mark making here is a more contour line along with the slightly darker background. Also from this, here is an obvious example of the common mark making technique used by Miura, hatching and cross-hatching. Whilst there is still evidence of the contour outline drawn, the shocked expression of Guts' face is emphasized by the shadows created by the mark making. Guts is a character almost reminiscent of Charles Schulz's character Pigpen, who is often covered in dust and lack of personal health, something that Guts is often experiencing as well. Due to his life on the battlefield, the dirt and battle wounds drawn upon him is a common sight, and this close-up shot is drawn so incredibly detailed to show the strain of the previous fight. The mark making betrays shock, alludes to the unbelievability of what Guts is seeing, and helps the viewer feel the grit and grime of the story, as even after the fight there is a greater foreboding evil looming just in front. In the entirety of this chapter, there are examples of balance, unity, movement, and symmetry. The full page spread is utilized by the author as a way to show how he uses the space to share the message of the specific chapter. It draws our attention outwards, Griffith touching Zod with graceful elegance, full spread of Salat's eyes in the center, and movements with Guts yelling before remembering his new purpose was to protect Casca. Miura is allowing us as viewers to change our perspective, which unlocks a new perception for us. In traditional Berserk fashion, as usual, the blood and guts of the countless bodies being shredded by Zod are drawn with the same visceral detail, and even though it's violence, Miura makes it look truly beautiful. Whilst more a collection of shots from purely digitally drawn art in the more recent of the story, Casca's traumatic flashbacks are some of the most intricately expressed drawings within the manga. Miura and his studio moved completely to digital art from roughly volume 38 to 39, and whilst the art has certainly been criticized in the quality, there are still glimpses of digital art that show Miura's unrivaled talent. Artists usually start with a rough sketch using basic brush tools, a similar step to traditional pencil sketching, and is used to lay out composition, characters, and key elements. Layering comes next, digital art allowing for multiple layers, which allows artists to build upon the original layer. This makes it far easier to make adjustments without affecting the base. Digital art has many benefits such as efficiency, flexibility, and consistency, which is why it became a very favorable process over the traditional work. I myself prefer traditional Berserk, but I highly doubt this is a hot take, and still appreciate Miura's work incredibly when he switched. Casca's mind is restored to some level of sanity from her trauma, a result of her brutal assault and death of the Band of the Hawk, and I have made an analysis on her return already, and why it is really amazing, yet the images that flash before her are somewhat burnt into her psyche and hard to escape regardless of the magical therapy she undergoes. This is a nod to how trauma cannot be magically fixed and there is no paradise to escape to, even within the mind. Mostly every character has trauma of some sort, and Casca's is some of the most detailed and expressed within the manga. Guts acts as a trigger to her trauma, a visual representation of her past, sparking her memory to flash across her, illuminated behind him the darkness, eldritch horrors she experienced, the endless repeated faces all drawn to express a form of turmoil and pain, spiraling all the way up to the black sun in the middle of the panel. The emphasis of centralizing the ecliptic sun and moon to hammer home the main cause for her pain and trauma. The slideshow-like transition then shows Griffith's body, the panel's artwork drawn with really striking composition. We are only able to view the mouth and torso of Griffith, who had been brutally tortured during his year's captivity. The panel takes our eyes first to the torso with visible ribs, then to the helmet with an open mouth, perhaps breathing heavily or even calling out in pain, and then to the lock on the helmet. Whilst we cannot see the upper part of Griffith's face, we can assume that his vision is obscured and his skin equally torn away. This path is intentional by Miura, as our eyes tend to travel first to darker parts of art and then to the light. The dark part in between Griffith's torso and arm on the upper left part of the art is where our eyes will begin, going to the torso, then to the right with the head and helmet. This artwork is packed with Miura's beautiful hatching, creating light parts with less marks and darker spots that may make the reader feel uncomfortable in their own skin as they view such a horrendous state. Light is an integral part of creating form, and even though this is an image from Casca's memory, the light source creating highlights and shadows gives the panel an eerie look. Another moment of her trauma surfaces when seeing Guts again not so soon after. However, when he steps out, this time he is part of the demonic force she is so traumatized from. The art here is fantastic, making use of stippling to blend the entire ensemble together, wrapping Guts himself up within the striking imagery of her subconscious. This proves that deep within her psyche, the images and Guts himself are also tightly wound, that healing her will be a lengthy process indeed. The shading is spectacular and clearly an experimental sketch from Miura that ended up with the desired effect. The swarm of monsters blending in with Guts paints the same image as all of those chapters long ago, where the onslaught of the apostles acted as an all-encompassing wave. Now, obviously there are so many incredible panels within Berserk, speaking on every single one would take literal years. However, I hope that mine and Rio's efforts can even express the beauty of Miura's craftsmanship to a point where you can appreciate his work more. I wanted moments spanning the entirety of the manga, and these moments always stuck out to me whenever I reread the manga. Sorry for this video taking ages, life got a bit trickier, but I will be uploading here and there for the foreseeable future. Thank you guys for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and until the next one, peace out.